The building looked calm from the outside, glass shining under the morning light. People coming and going like any other workday. Inside, everything followed routine. Employees tapped cards, elevators moved up and down, coffee machines hummed. It was a place built on order, rules, and schedules. She arrived early. She always did. Her desk was near the back of the floor, not close to the windows or executive offices. She liked it that way. It helped her focus. She believed good work didn't need attention, only consistency. For 3 years, she had shown up on time, completed every task, and never caused trouble. No warnings. No complaints. No special treatment that morning, though. Her hands were shaking. The reason sat quietly beside her desk. Legs too short to touch the floor, eyes moving around the office with fear and wonder mixed together. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. His jacket was thin, dirty at the cuffs. A small bruise darkened one side of his forehead. He held a plastic bag tightly. It's like letting go might make him disappear. She kept glancing at him, worried someone would notice too soon. She had not planned for this. None of it was planned. It started an hour earlier, outside the building, when she spotted him sitting on the steps near the entrance, curled up against the cold stone. At first, she thought he was waiting for a parent. But minutes passed, people walked by, and no one came back for him. When she approached, he looked up fast, ready to run. She spoke softly, asking simple questions. Was he lost? Was he hurt? Did he know where his family was? He didn't answer at first. He just clutched the bag tighter. Finally, he said he didn't want the police. His voice was shaking. That alone told her something was wrong. She noticed his shoes were soaked, socks damp. He smelled like he had been outside all night. She knew the rules. Children were not allowed past security. Visitors had to be logged. Any emergency should be reported immediately. No exceptions. Every employee knew this. Breaking those rules could cost someone their job. She also knew what it felt like to be ignored as a child. That memory made her. Decision before her mind had finished arguing. She told security she would be right back, guided the boy inside another entrance, and brought him up to her floor. Hoping she could figure out what to do next before anyone noticed, now he sat beside her desk, silent, trusting her in a way that felt heavy on her chest. Around them, coworkers arrived one by one. Some laughed. Some complained about traffic. Everything felt normal to them. To her, every sound felt louder. A woman from accounting walked by and froze mid-step. Her eyes dropped to the boy, then shot back up. "What's this?" she asked, half joking, half sharp. She forced a small smile and said he was just visiting for a few minutes. The woman frowned, but kept walking. That was the first look. The second came from a manager, then another. Whispers started to spread, short glances turning into longer ones. Phones appeared. Someone typed faster than usual. Rules were being broken. And everyone knew it. On the top floor, the CEO arrived. He was known as a strict leader. The kind who believed systems worked when followed without exception. He valued discipline, order, and fairness. People admired him, but they also feared crossing lines around him as he stepped out of the elevator. His assistant mentioned an issue reported by security. A child had been seen entering the building without authorization. The CEO stopped walking. "What child?" he asked. "Not sure yet," the assistant said. "It appears an employee brought him in. Security is reviewing the footage." The CEO frowned. Unauthorized entry was serious. Safety risks, legal problems, public image, everything flashed through his mind. "Who is the employee?" he asked, still confirming. The assistant replied. By the time the CEO reached his office, the footage was already paused on screen. It showed the side entrance. It showed her face clearly, calm, focused, holding the door open for the boy. The CEO recognized her immediately. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. That surprised him. She was one of the last people he expected to be involved in something like this. Her record was spotless, reliable, invisible in the best way. Yet the evidence was clear. "She knows the rules," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," the assistant replied. The CEO folded his hands. Policy allowed no special cases. Allowing one rule to be broken opened doors to chaos. He had built his career shutting those doors firmly. Schedule a meeting, he said. Immediately, on the lower floor, she could feel it coming. The email arrived before anyone spoke to her directly. A formal request to report upstairs. No explanation. No tone. Just instructions. Her heart sank. She looked at the boy who was now drawing shapes on a scrap piece of paper she gave him. He avoided eye contact, like he blamed himself for everything. She told him to stay where he was. She asked a coworker she trusted to keep an eye on him for a few minutes. Without giving details, the coworker looked concerned but agreed as she walked toward the elevator. Conversations stopped around her. Eyes followed. Judgments were already made in silence. People assumed carelessness. Some assumed manipulation. Others assumed attention-seeking. No one asked why. The CEO stood by the window when she entered his office. He didn't offer a seat. Do you know why you're here? He asked. Yes, she said. You brought a child into the building without permission, he continued. His voice was calm, controlled. Yes, why? She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, the room was quiet. She stared at her hands, then met his eyes. Because leaving him outside felt worse, she said. The CEO frowned. That wasn't an answer. Not to him. You put the company at risk, he said. I know, she replied. You broke clear policy. Yes. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. That unsettled him more than excuses would have. He studied her face and saw something he couldn't easily label. Fear, yes, but not for herself. Who is the boy? He asked. She hesitated. He's someone who needed help, she finally said. That is not your role here, the CEO replied, sharper now. Your role is your job. She nodded. I understand. Silence stretched again. The CEO felt ready to end the conversation. A warning at minimum. Possibly termination. It would send a message. It always did, yet something felt unfinished. You can go, he said. She paused at the door. Whatever happens, she said softly. Not turning around, I'd make the same choice again. She left before he could respond. Back downstairs. The boy was still waiting, knees pulled up. Looking around nervously, she sat beside him again. Unsure how much time she had left. Outside the office, decisions were already moving. Emails, phone calls. Discussions framed by rules, not context. But beneath all of it, one question quietly refused to go away. Why had she helped him? And that question, unanswered, began to change everything. She returned to her desk with slow steps, trying to keep her face steady. Every step felt heavier than the last. She knew people were watching, but she refused to meet their eyes. Sitting down, she felt the quiet tension settle around her like a weight. The boy looked up when she returned. His eyes searched her face, as if trying to read the future in it. Are you in trouble? He asked in a small voice. She forced a gentle smile. Not yet. That answer seemed to calm him a little. He went back to drawing on the paper, but his hands still shook slightly. She noticed it, and her chest tightened. She slid a cup of water toward him. He drank it quickly, like he hadn't had enough in a long time. Around them, the office felt different now. The laughter from earlier was gone. Conversations stayed low. Nobody wanted to be involved. Some coworkers looked away like the sight of the boy made them uncomfortable. Others watched with open curiosity, waiting to see what would happen next. A manager passed by and slowed down. He cleared his throat. You know, this is serious, he said quietly. Not in anger, but in warning. She nodded. I do. He sighed and walked away, pretending not to care any more than he had to. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Time moved strangely, stretching and folding in on itself. Her email inbox stayed silent, which somehow felt worse. Every vibration of her phone made her jump. The boy leaned closer to her and whispered, I didn't mean to cause problems. She placed her hand on the desk between them. You didn't. He looked relieved by those words. It's like he was used to carrying blame that didn't belong to him. She finally asked him gently where he had slept the night before. He shrugged. Outside, he said. Near a bus stop. He hadn't wanted to go to the shelter because last time, nobody listened when he said his things were taken. She didn't push for more. She knew how shutting down looked. She had done it herself once. Her thoughts drifted back 2 years ago, standing in a school hallway with a torn backpack. Teacher walking past her without asking anything. People noticed rules faster than pain. A message eventually came. Not an email this time, but a soft voice behind her. The CEO stood there. Close up, he looked more tired than she expected. Lines at the corner of his eyes. He hadn't bothered to hide his presence or announce himself. The whole office went silent the moment people realized who was standing there. Walk with me, he said. She stood slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't show it. She turned to the boy. I'll be right back, she told him. The CEO glanced down at the boy, really looked at him this time. Not as a problem, not as a risk, but as a child. His jacket, the bruise, the plastic bag. Make sure he stays here, the CEO said to a nearby supervisor. No one bothers him. That surprised more than one person. They walked down the hall together. He didn't speak at first. Neither did she. The quiet between them wasn't angry, just heavy. Finally, he spoke. You understand how serious this situation is, he said. Double quotes. Yes. Put yourself in a position where I have very little room to be flexible. I know. She kept her eyes forward. She wasn't trying to soften him with emotion. She had already made peace with the risk. They stopped near a conference room. He gestured for her to sit. This time he sat too. I reviewed your record, he said. There's nothing like this on it. She nodded. That's true. So something changed, he said. People don't suddenly ignore rules for no reason. She hesitated. For the first time since entering the building that morning, she spoke more than single answers. He was alone, she said, cold, hurt, and scared of the police. It still doesn't explain bringing him inside. The CEO replied, because leaving him outside was a choice too, she said. I couldn't make that one. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched in her lap. The CEO leaned back, had heard many explanations in his career. Most were polished, defensive, strategic. This one wasn't. Why didn't you call social services? He asked. I will, she said. But not before he feels safe enough to talk. That word lingered. Safe. The CEO looked through the glass wall at the office beyond, saw his company humming forward, systems intact. And yet one small human situation had slipped through every safeguard. Do you know who he is? He asked. She nodded slowly. I don't know him personally, she said. But his father worked maintenance here last year. Contract role. He used to wait for him after school. The CEO frowned. That wasn't in the report. His father stopped showing up one day, she continued. No calls, no notice. I asked about it. Nobody followed up. The CEO felt a chill of discomfort. Contractors came and went all the time. It was normal not to ask questions, but now there were. You're saying this boy is connected to this company? He said. In a way, she replied. Silence returned thicker this time. She wasn't accusing. She wasn't dramatic. She was stating facts and letting them sit where they landed. What makes you think no one followed up? The CEO asked. Because if someone had, she said gently, he wouldn't have been sleeping outside. The CEO rubbed his temple. He didn't like how that made him feel. What do you want to happen now? He asked. She looked surprised by the question. I want him safe, she said. That's all. In your job? He asked. She took a breath. That matters less. That answer hit harder than she intended. The CEO stood and walked to the window. He had built this place with careful planning. He believed in responsibility. But listening to her, he realized how easily responsibility could be passed around until no one held it anymore. When he turned back, his voice was quieter. Stay at your desk, he said. Don't leave the building. I'll handle the rest. She stood as well. Thank you. He paused at the door. This situation isn't over, he added. I know, she replied. Back at her desk, the boy looked up again, nervous. Am I in trouble? He asked. No, she said firmly. You're not. Time passed again, but something had shifted. The whispers were quieter now. People watched the CEO move through the office with purpose. Calls were made. Reports were requested. The boy was brought something to eat. Nothing fancy, just simple food, but his eyes lit up like it was a gift. She watched him eat, feeling both relief and fear. Whatever happened next would change something. For her? For him? Maybe for the company. For the first time since the morning began, the CEO sat alone in his office. Staring at the paused footage on his screen, he didn't see a rule being broken. Anymore, he saw a door being opened when no one else had noticed it was closed. And he knew that before the day ended, he would have to decide what kind of leader he truly was. The afternoon moved slowly, like the building itself was holding its breath. People tried to return to their work, but focus was hard to find. Every so often, someone glanced toward her desk, then looked away again. She stayed where she was, just as she had been told, answering emails, keeping her voice calm whenever someone spoke to her. Inside, her thoughts were loud. The boy sat quietly, chewing the last of his food with care, like he didn't know when the next meal would come. When he finished, he folded the empty wrapper neatly and placed it back into the plastic bag. That small action stayed with her. It told a story without words. She asked if he wanted to draw again. He nodded. This time, he drew a house. It had crooked windows and a door that looked too small, but he colored it carefully. Around it, he added lines that looked like rain. She didn't ask what it meant. Across the building, doors closed and opened. The CEO moved between offices, his steps firm but slower than usual. He spoke with legal staff, then human resources, then someone from building services. Each conversation added another layer to the situation. Procedures were reviewed, forms were pulled, timelines were questioned, yet none of it gave him the answer he kept circling back to. Why had no one acted sooner? A report confirmed what the employee had said. The boy's father had worked on site for nearly a year. Reliable, quiet, no record of conflict. One day he simply stopped showing up. His contract ended quietly, marked as incomplete, and the file was closed. No follow-up. No welfare check. Nothing in the system flagged concern because nothing in the system was designed to. The CEO felt a heavy sense of failure, not just personal, but structural. The company had rules for everything except humanity. Late in the afternoon, he asked for the child to be brought upstairs. When the request reached her, her chest tightened. She worried he was being moved away from her, pulled into more systems that would overwhelm him. She corrected herself quickly. Fear wouldn't help either of them now. She walked with him, too. The elevator, keeping her hand close in case he reached for it. He did. The elevator ride felt long. Stared at the buttons in silence. The CEO was waiting when they arrived. The office felt large and unfamiliar to the boy. Clutched his bag tighter and stepped closer to her without realizing it. You can sit, the CEO said gently, surprising both of them. The boy glanced at her for reassurance. She nodded, and he sat on the chair, feet swinging above the floor. The CEO didn't start with questions. He left his desk and crouched slightly, lowering himself to the boy's level. Are you hungry? He asked. The boy shook his head. I ate. That's good, the CEO said. His voice was different now, less sharp, less distant. After a moment, he asked where the boy's father was. The boy's lower lip trembled, stared at the floor. I don't know, he whispered. He went to work and didn't come back. The room went quiet. Even the hum of the city outside felt muted. How long ago? CEO asked softly. Months, the boy said. The CEO looked up at the woman standing beside him. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't interrupt. The boy explained in pieces. Neighbors who stopped answering. A landlord who locked the door, nights spent moving from place to place. A backpack that went missing. And today, the CEO asked. I came here, the boy said simply. This is where my dad worked. I thought maybe someone knew. The words hit harder than any accusation. The CEO stood slowly. Thank you for telling me, said. He asked the boy if he would like to sit with the woman while the adults talked. The boy nodded and followed her to the side of the room. The CEO finally turned to her fully. "You weren't exaggerating," he said. "No," she replied. He rubbed his hands together. The weight of decision pressed in. "We contacted local services," he continued. "They are on their way." The boy stiffened at the word services. She crouched down beside him and whispered that it didn't mean he was in trouble. He wouldn't be alone. The CEO watched this interaction closely. He saw the trust. The way the boy leaned toward her without fear. That trust had been earned, not assumed. He made another call, this one to a community group the company donated to but rarely interacted with. He asked questions he hadn't asked before, fast ones, careful ones. When the call ended, he exhaled deeply. "This company benefits from people like you," he said suddenly. She looked startled. "Not because you broke a rule," he continued, "but because you noticed something no system flagged." She swallowed. "I didn't do it for the company," she said. "I know," the CEO replied. "That may be the point." A soft knock came at the door. Two kind-looking women entered, speaking quietly, moving slowly. They addressed the boy first, then her. No raised voices, no sudden movements. They explained what would happen next, step by step. The boy asked if he could come back here again. The CEO felt something tighten in his chest. "Yes," he said, "if you want to." "You're welcome." That promise wasn't written anywhere. But it mattered. As the boy stood to leave, he turned to her. "Will I see you again?" he asked. She knelt and met his eyes. "Yes," she said. "I promise." After they left, the room felt empty in a new way. The CEO returned to his desk, staring out at the city below. He thought of the policy he had been ready to enforce without hesitation. He thought of the line between discipline and understanding, and how thin it had been all along. "She won't be punished," he said, more to himself than anyone else. But he knew the story wasn't finished, because saving one child was not enough. Tomorrow, people would ask questions. Policies would be tested. Leadership would be challenged. And he was no longer sure going back to the old way was an option at all. The next morning, the building felt different. The same doors opened. The same lights turned on. But something invisible had shifted. People were quieter, more aware. The story from yesterday had spread, even without names or details. Everyone knew something big had happened, and that it involved a child, a rule, a choice. She arrived earlier than usual. Her desk felt strangely empty without the boy beside it. She kept expecting to hear the scratch of a pencil or feel someone tug at her sleeve. Instead, there was only the hum of computers and the low sounds of morning routines. She checked her phone. No messages. No updates. The silence made her uneasy. She replayed everything in her mind. The moment she saw him outside, the door she opened, the look on the CEO's face when he finally understood why. She reminded herself that even if consequences came later, she still didn't regret what she had done. Mid-morning, an email arrived. It wasn't formal. It wasn't aggressive. It was short. "Please come to the conference room on the top floor." Her stomach tightened. She stood, smoothed her clothes, and took a deep breath. As she walked through the office, she caught eyes again, but this time the looks were different. Less judgment. More curiosity. A few people gave quiet nods, like they didn't know what to say, but wanted her to know. They'd noticed something important had happened. The conference room was already occupied. The CEO sat at the long table, along with two senior leaders and someone from human resources. Papers were spread out, but not in neat stacks. They looked disturbed, handled, real. He gestured for her to sit. She did. For clarity, the CEO began. "This is not a disciplinary meeting." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We're here because what happened exposed a gap." He continued, "Not just in rules, but in responsibility." One of the others spoke up. "We reviewed similar cases. Contractors who disappeared. Families no longer reachable. We assumed other systems would catch it. But they didn't," the CEO said. Everyone fell silent. He turned to her. "You said you recognized the boy." "Yes," she replied. "He used to wait near the service entrance sometimes." He'd help his father carry tools. They mostly kept to themselves. Did you ever report concerns before? Another executive asked. She nodded. Once, I mentioned he seemed alone a lot. I was told it wasn't our role. No one argued with that, because it had been true, and that truth felt uncomfortable now. The CEO folded his hands. You made a decision yesterday that forced us to look beyond policy, he said. That's not something I take lightly. She braced herself. We won't be punishing you, he continued. But we also won't pretend this was simple. She nodded again. I didn't expect it to be. That child trusted you, the CEO said. That matters. He leaned forward slightly. We want to support him properly, and we want you involved if you're willing. Her eyes widened. Involved how? Staying connected. Offering familiarity. Helping him feel grounded while other systems do their work. She didn't hesitate. Yes, the answer came too fast to be anything but honest. The meeting ended with more planning than she expected. New processes were discussed. Emergency response paths that didn't only involve security or removal. Real people assigned to real cases. As she left the room, she felt something unfamiliar. Respect, not praise. Respect. That afternoon, she received a short message from the community group. The boy was safe. Temporary housing had been arranged. He had asked about her twice. Her chest tightened in relief. She asked if she could visit. The answer was yes. The place wasn't far. A converted building, warm but simple. When she arrived, the boy spotted her almost immediately. He froze for half a second, then ran toward her. Stopping short like he wasn't sure he was allowed to hug her, she opened her arms. He stepped in carefully and held on. I knew you'd come, he said. Of course, she replied. They sat together while he talked. He showed her a drawing he had made of the office building. This time, the house from before stood next to it. The rain wasn't as heavy. Back at work, the CEO watched reports roll in. Not just about the boy, but about others. Quiet cases. Missed signals. The kind of issues no one talked about because they didn't show up on spreadsheets. He thought of his younger self, convinced that strict rules kept chaos away. Now he wondered if they sometimes just helped people look the other way. A few days later, he asked her to stop by his office again. This company can do better, he said without preface. But change makes people uncomfortable. I know, she replied. You may face pressure, he continued. Some will say, you've crossed a line. Others will praise you too much. Both can be isolating. I can handle it, she said. He studied her carefully. Why? She thought for a moment. Because someone once handled it for me, she said quietly. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. Weeks passed. New guidelines were introduced quietly, without announcements or applause. Emergency support contacts. A small fund for immediate needs. Training focused on noticing, not ignoring. Not everyone approved. Some thought the company was becoming soft. Others worried about liability. There were tense discussions. Long meetings. Late nights, but slowly. Something changed. People started looking up from their screens, checking twice, asking questions that hadn't existed before. One afternoon, she took her break and stepped outside. The same steps where she had first seen the boy were now empty. Sunlight warmed the stone. She sat for a moment, letting the memory settle. Nothing could undo what he'd been through. Nothing could fix the months he had spent alone. But someone had opened a door when it mattered. She received a message while sitting there. The boy had been placed with a supportive family. Temporary, but stable. He was attending school again. He wanted to bring her a drawing soon. She smiled, tears blurring her vision. Inside the building, the CEO stood at the window, watching employees move through the atrium. The company still ran on rules. It always would. But now there was space for something else. Understanding in that, he realized, might be the hardest decision he had ever made, and the most important. The weeks that followed did not bring loud announcements or public praise. There were no speeches, no headlines, no ceremonies. Change arrived quietly, the way real change often does. It moved through conversations, decisions, and small shifts in behavior that added up over time. For her, life slowly returned to routine. But it was not the same routine she had before. People spoke to her differently now. Not carefully, not awkwardly, just honestly. Some thanked her in passing. Others shared stories they had never said out loud before. A woman from another department told her about a neighbor's child she worried about but never knew how to help. A man from operations admitted he once ignored a situation because it didn't feel like his place. She listened more than she spoke. She understood. That's something now. Courage was not loud. It did not always feel strong. Sometimes it was just doing the next right thing while your hands were still shaking. One afternoon, the boy returned to the building. This time, he didn't come in through a side door. He walked confidently through the main entrance. Holding a piece of folded paper, eyes bright, shoulders no longer hunched, a staff member from the community group walked beside him, smiling softly but letting him lead. When he saw her, he grinned from ear to ear. She stood, heart racing in a way she hadn't expected. He ran toward her and stopped, remembering himself, then laughed and hugged her anyway. "I told them this is where you work," he said proudly. She knelt to his level. "I'm glad you came." He handed her the folded paper. Inside was a drawing. The building stood tall and solid. Beside it was a smaller house with light in the windows. At the top, drawn carefully, were two figures standing close together. She didn't need words to understand it. The CEO watched the interaction from a distance. He had not planned to be there. He told himself that more than once. But some moments deserved attention, even if no one recorded them. Later that day, he asked her to join him for a short walk outside the building. They sat on the same steps where everything had begun. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think leadership meant never hesitating." She looked at him. "Listening now. I think it means knowing when hesitation is needed," he continued, pausing long enough to ask why. She nodded. "You changed the direction of this place," he said. "Not because you broke a rule, because you reminded us why rules exist in the first place." She thought about that for a moment. "I don't think I changed it alone." "No," he agreed, "but you started it." Work went on. Projects moved forward. Deadlines were met. The company remained successful. But inside it, subtle things had shifted. New hires were trained, not just on procedures, but on responsibility beyond checklists. Managers were encouraged to ask more questions before closing cases. Contractors were followed up on. Families were not treated as invisible. There were still debates. There always would be. Caring required effort. Effort cost time. But fewer people were willing to accept silence as an answer. For the boy, days became more predictable. School, meals, routine, simple things that meant everything. He still carried the plastic bag sometimes, out of habit. But it wasn't always clenched so tightly anymore. He wrote her notes. Short ones. Messy handwriting. Mostly drawings. Each one stayed on her desk. On a quiet evening, after most people had left, she stood by the window and watched the city lights turn on one by one. She thought about how close everything had come to going wrong. One decision, one email, one rigid enforcement, and the story would have ended very differently. She also knew something else now. Doing the right thing did not guarantee safety. It did not protect you from consequences. It only guaranteed that you could live with yourself afterward. The CEO locked his office later than usual that same night. As he walked through the nearly empty building, he passed her desk. The drawings were still there. He paused, looking at them longer than he expected. This, he thought, is what success should look like. Not numbers alone, not growth alone, but the quiet proof that people mattered. Outside, the air was cool. The steps were empty, but they no longer felt forgotten, and somewhere not far away. A boy slept in a safe place, knowing that when he reached out, someone had answered. The months that followed settled into something that felt almost normal. But beneath that calm, new layers kept forming. Change does not finish when the story stops being dramatic. It either fades quietly or becomes part of everyday life. In this place, it stayed. She was no longer just another face behind a desk. People trusted her, not in a formal way, not with titles or authority, but with honesty. They came to her when something felt off, and they didn't know how to label it. A contractor who stopped answering calls. A woman who always stayed late because home was complicated. A delivery driver who lingered too long before leaving. She never pretended to have all the answers. Sometimes all she did was listen. Other times, she walked with them to the right person and made sure the question didn't get dismissed. The CEO noticed. Made small shifts even when others didn't. Metrics couldn't track them. But the tone of meetings changed. People spoke up sooner. Problems surfaced earlier. Trust, once built, created faster solutions than fear ever had. One afternoon, a situation came up that tested everything again. Security reported a teenager sleeping near the loading bay early one morning. Not a child this time. Older, almost grown. Normally, the response would have been simple. Ask him to leave. Call someone else. Close the door instead. The supervisor paused. He remembered the training. But more than that, he remembered the story he'd never stopped thinking about. He called upstairs. The CEO was pulled into the decision within minutes. Not because of rank, but because responsibility was now shared. By the time the teenager left the building safely, with food and directions and a referral to help, word had already spread. Not as gossip. As reassurance, people felt safer doing the human thing that evening. The CEO sat alone in his office again, the lights dimmed. He thought about how much effort it had once taken to maintain control. How exhausting it had felt to believe one mistake could undo everything now. Control looked different. It looked like trust. He remembered the moment he'd almost ended her career with a signature. How close he had come to closing a door that never should have been shut. He was grateful he had waited. She, meanwhile, sat at her desk finishing a task she could have saved for the next day. She wasn't rushing to leave. Not out of fear or obligation. But because she liked the quiet now, her phone vibrated. A message. The boy had finished another school term. He was doing better than expected. He had made a friend. He wanted to know if she could come to his small school event next week. She smiled and typed. Back yes before thinking twice. At the event. She sat in a small chair that creaked under her weight. Surrounded by adults pretending not to notice how awkward they looked. The boy waved at her from the front, beaming. When it was over, he ran to her, breathless, talking about everything at once. You stayed, he said suddenly, looking up at her. You didn't leave when things got hard. She crouched just enough to meet his eyes. Neither did you. At night, she cried in her car. Not from sadness. From release. From understanding how far they had both come. Back at the company, a new role was quietly created. Not publicly announced. Not designed for attention. A point person for situations that didn't fit neatly anywhere.
Else.
The CEO offered it to her. She hesitated, not because she didn't want it, but because she knew accepting meant being responsible for more weight, like the kind she'd already carried. Think about it, the CEO said. No pressure. She did think about it. For days, she thought about the girl she had been once. The one who waited for someone to notice. She thought about the boy on the steps. About the drawing still folded in her bag. She accepted. The role didn't change her desk much. It didn't come with a bigger office. What it did come with was permission. Permission to ask questions without being brushed aside. Permission to slow things down when speed would cause harm. Not everyone liked it. There were complaints. Quiet ones. Whispers about going too soft. About distraction from core goals. The CEO listened to those concerns too. Leadership didn't mean ignoring discomfort. It meant deciding what discomfort was worth it. And this was one evening. Long after most people had gone home, she and the CEO walked through the building together. The floors were quiet, the lights dim. Do you ever wish that day had gone differently? He asked. She considered the question honestly. No, she said. I wish it had gone easier. but not differently, he nodded. Me too. They stopped near the entrance. The steps were lit softly now, no longer shadowed. Some people think stories like this end when the danger passes, he said. I think they begin there. I agree. Outside, the city moved as it always had, unaware of the shifts taking place inside a glass building. Most people would never know what had changed there. But sometimes, change doesn't need to be seen. Sometimes, it just needs to be there when someone knocks on the door again.